Bryce Young has been a highly touted quarterback for pretty much his entire life. He was the nation's #1 QB recruit in 2020, coming out of the premier college football factory in Mater Dei High School. He went on to win a Heisman Trophy and put up insane numbers over his 2 seasons as the starter at Alabama. And even though there was size concerns at 5'10", probably closer to 190 pounds, the Carolina Panthers traded the following first-round pick, which ended up being first overall, the next 2 second-rounders, and DJ Moore to Chicago in order to move up from 10th overall and open up the 2023 draft by calling his name. I'd say Bryce had an underwhelming but at least somewhat steady rookie season, despite a completely antiquated, dull passing game with little help around him. Carolina decided to bring out Dave Canales after the success he just had as the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, but Young had a catastrophic start to 2024 and was benched for veteran Andy Dalton just 2 games in, who at least early on looked more competent. It took a car injury to sideline the Red Rifle and for Bryce to be reinserted 6 weeks later, yet somehow he almost instantly looked like a completely different guy, and even though they only won 4 of the remaining 10 games, he delivered a lot more promise and was actually oftentimes let down by the rest of the team, the receiving corps and defense especially. So now there's some newfound excitement in Charlotte, and I'm going to show you why I believe that's validated. I watched all 451 dropbacks for Young from last season, and what we'll do here is run through every single game that he started and highlight some key moments or plays to illustrate the journey he took. We have to begin the season opener at New Orleans, which couldn't have started any worse. They bring the tight end over to create trips to the right, but then put a receiver in motion at the snap for basically the 2-man concept of play action, plus the check down option to the back here in the flats, where they're trying to isolate the single high safety, but those corners stick to those outside receivers, and this ball basically goes right between those 2 guys into the hands of the safety for an interception. Already down by 4 touchdowns coming out of halftime, after multiple unblocked pressures led to the Young quarterback getting taken down. Young tries to force the issue here on 3rd and 17, as veteran wide receiver Adam Thielen will convert his route up the sideline, but Bryce, running up the pocket, floats this one over his head for another easy pick by the safety, commanding the high post. Let's just quickly show this snap from the end zone view, where you can see Bryce's uncommon, somewhat erratic footwork, where he's a lot on the tips of his toes and sort of pedals backwards, clicks his heels at times, and has those choppy steps that are married to the intended depth of his drops. Here you see some bad spacing by those receivers in a second here, basically running into one another, and the ball weirdly bounces short of them and oddly spins on the ground, which you never really see. This is not to say that there weren't any good plays in the opener, such as this dig to Thielen laid between the 2nd and 3rd level, thrown with anticipation and conviction here. When on time, following a process and trusting himself, we saw some bright moments as a rookie, and he has enough arm talent to consistently hit throws outside the numbers, even if there's some cheating in terms of how he'll drift towards the target on longer distance throws at times. But on this 10-yard out to the short side of the field, he's able to identify the cover 3 rotation by these safeties, from a too high look initially, keep his posture downfield, and then hit Deontay Johnson at the sideline in rhythm. But unfortunately, things got only worse in the Chargers game the following week. Panthers come with an empty here, running back flexed out to the left, Deontay next to him running a dig, but Bryce will stare this down the whole way, and the safety playing quarters is going to be able to drive on the throw that is trying to place in front of the hook dropper, and makes this diving interception here. Watch his eyes from the endzone angle, predetermining where he's going, and never keeping a Lower Gilman at the bottom of the screen guessing. And we have a first turnover of the day. Later on, then trips to the left and get all 5 eligibles out there. A bit of deception for the Chargers here on the back end, but ultimately they're gonna have this 1 high safety in a cover 3 look. And Bryce can probably hit either the comeback or the flat routes in this high-low concept with the back and the tight end into the boundary. But probably the best throw is Thielen on his deep over routes or shallow post, if you want to call it that. Instead, the quarterback isn't sure what he's seeing and tries to scramble the other way, not feeling Joey Bosa off the right edge, who makes it easy for him to hunt him down. You can see as we flip things around that there's plenty of space to step up to the right here and keep all those options open, but instead he allows himself to get bumped backwards and runs himself into the sack when the right tackle is trying to take Bosa onto a wider track. You can see Young overthinking or trying to speed things up here way too much, missing a simple bubble to Thielen on 3rd and short, with how much cushion the safety provides as they bring the nickel. Should have been an easy one, but a bad miss here. Yet the culmination of all these things comes late, game already pretty much over, but on 4th down you see him try to get the ball to his back on a little jump pass without any reason other than him probably feeling small inside the pocket. As you see here, him taking the snap, trying to weigh his options and dump it off, but that's just never how you want to throw a pass altogether, and it gets batted down at the line. The Panthers coaching staff supposedly worked a lot with Bryce on his footwork during his time off, and it showed in real ways once he returned to the lineup, but even more so, it was just him regaining his confidence in his game, as his dropbacks didn't look a whole lot different, but just more in sync with everything that was going on within the offense, and less erratic altogether. In those first 2 weeks, Bryce posted a negative .514 expected points added per dropback. That's nearly twice as bad as the next closest quarterback during that stretch, which was last year's first overall pick Caleb Williams on a rough start to his rookie season in Chicago. His return in week 8 at Denver against a hellacious defense wasn't great, but from that point onwards, Bryce improved at the EPA mark to a positive .143, which would have ranked 15th league-wide, just ahead of Sam Darnold in his resurrected season, and that was with a 6% drop rate, which was triple actually on passes of 20 plus air yards, since he had always finished with the 2nd highest adjusted completion percentage league-wide on those. He also went from a Pro Football Focus labels as 1 big time throw versus 3 turnover-worthy plays through week 2 to going 26-9 the rest of the way. Obviously, since the circumstances set up Bryce's return to the lineup against Denver in week 8, the coaching staff tried to protect him, or rather tried to limit the potential damage, which is why they called 3 screens on the first 4 dropbacks, and why they call an odd slants here on a 3rd and 14, with very little chance of converting. But Young did re-spark some belief in him with throws like this, in the face of pressure, placing this ball perfectly to the outstretched arms of undrafted free agent wide receiver Jalen Coker down the sideline, on an out and up against his off corner. While lofting this ball over the heads of 2 defenders on this flood concept, with a D tackle in his lap, to Xavier Leggett on the deep out or the sail route. Yet unfortunately he was repaid at some point with this interception in the red zone, where he correctly identifies this inverted version of Tampa 2, as the boundary corner is supposed to sink and the middle backer is running the pole. Bryce is going to look him off the opposite way where he wants to go, trying to give his tight end on the backside some space on the swirl route, but that guy is slow and a little lazy at the break point, and deflects his pass that should hit him right in the hands for a pick by Pat Surtain instead, who nearly takes us up the sideline. One of the numbers I stumble upon support my case for Bryce receiving very little help. On passes behind the line of scrimmage, he averaged just 2.9 yards per attempt. That's a full yard behind Will Levis as the next closest guy from the bottom, and nearly another yard below number 3. Thankfully, these flashes emboldened the guys in charge to put the following game more into the hands of the second-year quarterback, and we got to see him repay that by redeeming himself against the Saints. Unfortunately, his receivers didn't get the memo early on, as here Bryce has to wait out the spear concept of play action, designed to put the deep middle safety in conflict. So he resets deep after the run fake, and beautifully lofts this over the head of the trailing corner to David Moore, who bobbles it on what should have been a touchdown. Here they're gonna roll Bryce to the right of this little zone flow with a backside drag route, a corner post from a slot, and Liggett on his hitch and go. Another lazy run route, but the perfect ball into the bucket that should defeat the tight coverage, yet the rookie wideouts can't pull it in, and it somehow ends up in the claws of the corner instead for an interception. Yet he was able to overcome it, as down by 6 on a pivotal 3rd and 10, Young motions the back next to him with sort of this loose bunch at the bottom of the screen, where they chip the edge with the tight end who will settle down into this voided space behind the Mills concept, with a curl on the backside and the back on a late release into the flats. The Saints are going to bump this middle receiver, but ultimately the safety stepping down here indicates that they're basically playing a version of cover 1, where this man can sort of catch his assignment and order his inside leverage, so the best throw is going to be on the outside with Liggett, breaking away from the corner, and now check out this ball over the sinking linebacker, sets them up at the opposing 40, and they run it in for a touchdown to win 23-22. The following week, they travel to Germany to take on the Giants, which turned out to be a fun game between two bad teams. Loved his first throw here. Carolina already up 7-0, coming out in a 2x2 with a tight end to the left. Will end up chipping and releasing into the flats, with the wideout as clear out, and Jalen Coker from the slot on this deep over route against cover 3, as this safety is going to bust down into the flats. Bryce keeps his eyes straight down the field initially, and then they're going to see him whistle his ball right past the weak side linebacker for a nice gain. Great snack by Coker too. This next one simply shows how much more freely he's playing, with a plan of what to do when things don't go quite right, as they bring this receiver in a condensed split across on jet motion and fake split zone the other way, in order to create sort of this free level concept for Bryce as he keeps the ball in the bootleg. But Brian Burns here stays home on the backside. The quarterback has to abort the bootleg, stop his feet, but then has the wherewithal to find Coker coming over the middle of the field anyway for a nice gain. Later on, Young shows his ability to hurt the defense for leaving an escape lane open for him, as the Giants bring this nickel on a 5-man rush with a TT twist on the inside. Everyone is well covered, but the quarterback darts up the middle and is able to get out to the sideline untouched to set up another touchdown, before basically sealing the game on this 3rd and 8 with just under 3 minutes left in the 4th quarter. Another empty set with the back end's reduced split to the left this time. Once again chipping and releasing to the flats, along with a slant and go to that side, while we've got sort of a smash concept to the field, as the flank has the short in, the middleman gets walled off on what should have probably been a whip route, and number 3 is on the deep 7 route. Again, check out the ball location on this one. Identifying the best throw away from the single high safety. A long throw with Dexter Lawrence getting into his grill, slightly pulling Leggett back down. That is beautiful. And just quickly on that point, Young was actually slightly better when pressured last season, as his turnover worthy play rate of 2.6% remained basically the same compared to when he was kept clean, but his big time throw rate jumped up from 5.5 to 8.9%, and those numbers are slightly better even when blitzed. Here's a pair of those moments against the Chiefs, less so in the first one, but rather just the patience to allow this basically 2-man concept of play action to develop, floating the ball to Leggett on pretty much a cross-country route, all the way from the left numbers to outside the opposite ones, where this ball is laying up in the air for a while and guides him to the sideline away from the defender. But here KC is able to flush Bryce on this mirrored ET twist, trying to find answers out of this empty set against just a 4-man rush. So he's going to be able to escape to the left as the pressure is coming in, and then lay the ball up there for Jadamian Sanders, converting his route vertically as the quarterback gets pushed into his chest. Multiple times, Bryce was able to beat a driving safety by hitting his guys out of their breaks, right on the money. Here in 3rd and 10, he does so on a dig, as the safety comes down in quarters, with David Moore once again coming over the middle on the dig. So after finishing that drive off with a touchdown, next time around on 3rd and 8, rushing all 7 guys here and playing cover 0 behind it. Out of the far bunch, Carolina has the tipman on a little screen fake, a fade on the outside, and a sail route by Moore once again, along this drag from the backside. Check out Bryce getting absolutely smoked and nailing this ball onto Moore as he breaks out to the sideline. Has to take the steeper drop, he already knows the pressure's coming in, but settles his feet and is able to deliver it right on the money. That's big time stuff. Same thing on a 4th and short later, as this time they motion the tight end in, and Casey actually brings 8, but the quarterback stays composed and lets this ball go early, as you've got a 2-over-2 and then 1-on-1 on the backside, tight end staying in as I already said. Lets this ball go early to Phelan, fighting through on the corner route with a little whip underneath. And they end up tying the game with a touchdown 2 plays later, but unfortunately never get the ball back, as the Chiefs kick a game-winning field goal. One of the stats that can be very indicative of the quarterback's impact, although it isn't purely on them, is 3rd down success. In the first 2 weeks, Bryson passes he actually got off only converted 1 of 16 such attempts for a fresh series, and that doesn't even include the 5 more sacks taken on 3rd downs. From that point onwards, he was able to convert a respectable 30% of those into new 1st downs. That was right there with Justin Herbert and Jaden Daniels, by the way, and Bryce helped with his legs to keep the chains moving quite a bit himself as well. Here's a 3rd and 10 the following week against the Bucks, who could bring up to 7 guys here. They end up dropping off 2, which muddies up the picture over the middle, and now it's time to create for Bryce. He escapes to the right, around to the end, and with a man barreling in on him, he lofts his ball to Tommy Tremble, converting up the sideline to beat this defender from the slots, driving on the flats for a chunk play. And the reason I love this play, as we watch it one more time from the end zone view, is that it shows his ability to anticipate movement and his vision for secondary reaction plays. Having the confidence here to know what the defense is doing, and being in sync with his tight end as well, also doing a good job of converting this to punish the defense for being over aggressive. Same down and distance late in the game, trips left where Young is initially looking to the slot receiver on the curl route, but you've got 2 defenders squeezing in on it, so he has to go backside to Liggett on another lazily run swirl route, but the ball is right on the money yet again whilst getting lit up, and the receiver unfortunately can't help him out. But not only did he have very few options anyway, but Bryce has continued to show that he'll maintain his confidence in his guys, as he does here with Phelan earlier on, bobbling what should have been a touchdown just before halftime, and they instead had to settle for a field goal. Because with just 36 seconds left, he slips up the B-gap, running up to the line of scrimmage, and hits Phelan bending across the face of this deep middle safety for a game-time touchdown. Unfortunately, Chuba Hubbard fumbles the ball in overtime, and Bryce never gets a real chance to finish the job. We're now looking at his matchup with the eventual Super Bowl champion Eagles, this first one on a 3rd and 13, where again he hits Phelan right as he snaps off these deep hook routes against the corner and safety in quarters driving on it. If he's a split second late, he's not going to deliver that ball, but instead he moves the chains. Throws like this one were almost the most prevalent ones on Bryce's tape. Just one rip after the other, hitting his targets right as they turn the heads after clearing zone defenders, or snapping off timing based routes. This next one here, an absolute mess of a play, no one open on this mesh concept, but Bryce somehow makes it work by drifting a little deeper in the pocket to force these rushers to take wider angles, takes off up the middle, stutter steps, and puts a move on the Kobe Dean at linebacker to convert another 3rd down. Which brings us to the final drive of the day, down by 6, starting in the shadows of their own goalpost. Again, no one open against this cover 6 look, and he's just gonna buy time, maneuver around, shake off a whoopee sack, and then finds Liggett once again turning out to the sideline, actually over the head of the trailing corner here, from the backside. And I want you to enjoy this one more time with me, where we get it from the quarterback's perspective, somehow making chicken soup out of you-know-what. As he creates some magic, which he was really known for at Alabama, one of those big things despite his size, being able to make plays like this, and he's finally working to find those again in the pros. This should have been a game winner with just under a minute left, as they get the field side safety to sit on number 3 curling up over the middle, and here's Liggett coming in behind him on the post route. Bryce sees that and delivers a perfect ball, which unfortunately upon further review, as it looks like a great diving grab, this was called incomplete. Before we get to 4th down, where Bryce is gonna run around, trying to give his targets time to find space, and he nearly connects with Phelan working across the field with him, but the ball ends up being just behind him and a little bit not quite enough. So unfortunately you lose this one as well. On the ability to negate the opposing pass rush to a certain degree, Bryce posted a 14.9% pressure to cert conversion rate since his return to the lineup. Due to his diminutive size for NFL standards, you do see him get taken down fairly easily when rushers do get a firm wrap on him, but he's become so much more aware of rush angles, how to manipulate those with sudden movements, and how much extra time he can buy. Plus he saw plenty of off-platform throws without his feet underneath himself. The outlier game being when he was sacked 6 times by the Cowboys, but all but 2 of those came on instant wins by one of the opposing pass rushers, with the other 2 just being the pocket compressed into him, and once Micah Parsons hawking him down from behind when he had space to run. Here is one of those moments where the second-year quarterback could actually squiggle out of this collapsing pocket on a 3rd and 14, and he's going to end up heaving the ball up for Liggett, turning up the sideline once again. As you see him somehow getting out of there, but the Rook receiver unfortunately can't get his feet in bounds, as he goes airborne for it. On one hand, bigger players at the position wouldn't even be able to swarm out of there, but it just shows his competitive toughness and his composure to keep the play alive, find a creative solution, and at least give his team a chance. Because if the defense makes a mistake, as they do later on this basic first down call, he'll take full advantage of it. There's some miscommunication to the field here, I guess, as the corner ends up playing the flats, when based on the rest of the coverage it looks like he should be responsible for a deep third, and squeeze in on the seam route by Jalen Coker out of the slot, who ends up going uncontested for a big gain, with no hesitation from the quarterback to let it rip, which the undrafted free agent does the rest here, taking this 83 yards to the house for a big touchdown to keep them in the game. Bryce continues to battle and is able to scamper in for a touchdown here. When Contain isn't held up, he escapes to the right and turns this into a 2-touchdown affair, as the defense doesn't really account for him. But his efforts are in vain, as on a late comeback attempt, David Moore drops the ball here. When they have this levels concept to the drip side out of this empty set, along with a wrap element on the backside, with number 83 going behind this little sit-down element, Bryce probably already identifies cover 1 based on the leverage of these defensive backs. So he tries to make this deep help safety open up to the field, and then comes back to the dig, a little high maybe, because he doesn't want someone underneath to get a hand on this, but should absolutely be caught. And then he throws a pick on the very next play, trying to force the issue up the post, against the rotation into cover 2, where this nickel makes a great play after bailing out to the half to fall inside as they try to split it with Thielen up the pole. Which brings us to the Arizona game, maybe his best of the entire season. First offensive play, Thielen has this ball perfectly dropped into the bucket on a fade, and it ends up slipping right through his hands. That's something you saw a lot more since Young's return to the lineup, taking his one-on-ones, especially into the boundary, but he didn't have the one guy that he could rely upon coming up with those, although I believe he still needs a little better calibration and a little more consistent placement on those, but certainly not here. Let's quickly show the longest run of his still young career, 34 yards in this one, where he allows the interior twist to work out after turning his back to the defense on play action before taking off up the middle and showing off some pretty good burst to get away from the pursuits and step out of bounds. Yet on the very next drop back, they bring in the tight end and running back initially, but Arizona doesn't declare that they actually bring in 6 until the snap is imminent. So obviously the defense is going to have a free rusher, which is this outside linebacker off the right side for the offensive perspective, which means Bryce rapidly has to get his cleats into the ground and take the best, safest throw, which is placing his flanker fade with space from the inside of the numbers to the back shoulder of Coker, but the rookie never even turns his head around when he should see the protection being overloaded as his eyes are inside for the snap. And Bryce shows some maturity here as we think back to how the last game against Dallas ended, trying to push the ball up the middle between the two high safeties, as this guy into the boundary is going to have the freedom to fall inside as well. So instead he knows that he has his protection sliding to the right, the left B-gap is uncovered, and open for him to take off, a little hesitation and dip inside to get this defender blocked. And he finishes off a 23-yard touchdown on 3rd down. The flag was on the defense, by the way. This is one of those more exotic coverage rotations we've seen from the Cardinals, where they blitz this boundary corner and a reduced split with the wide receiver, cloud the single high safety over the top on that side, and then the box safety Buda Baker the other way is going to bail out into a deep half as well. So theoretically, as you bring this receiver across, you have this rail route of motion and the post corner or deep out route with space against the safety being isolated, but number 34 does well to play in between those two routes, and it requires a perfect throw. Look at how Bryce pulls more down here. It's a tough diving grab, but it protects the receiver from the safety potentially lighting him up, and it ends up being a nice gain. But my favorite play of the entire day comes on the 2nd down play, up by 3 at that point, when Carolina motions from trips into the boundary into a 2x2. Arizona is in a 5-1 front, And the off-ball linebacker doesn't tip off at all that he's going to blitz through the A-gap unblocked, what the offense is doing in a dart protection with a token run fake to the left. It's a perfect call by the defense, yet Bryce is somehow able to hang in there just long enough and place the ball to his tight end Tremble on the shallow cross just past the edge, peeling off, and the safety trailing from the other side. And you have to watch this one more time from the endzone angle to really appreciate how quickly off this has to happen. And then also the hits Young takes here right in the chest from Kaiser White, as the defense is pretty static at the snap. Then Kaiser comes, and check out how he puts this ball on the money just past this defender peeling off the line of scrimmage for a nice gain once again. And after one more completion, he tosses this touchdown to Moore on the backside fade that put them up by 10, yet the defense couldn't get a stop, and his effort was wasted as they ultimately lost in overtime. Again, first play of the game in the rematch against the Bucks, this time Phelan hauls in the slot fade for a chunk gain. And they finish the drive with this touchdown to Phelan once more, taking advantage of an aggressive quarter safety with a tendency breaker on the dig and up. That's a nice design and a job here to place the ball in front of the safety. 1 sack and a dropped screen on the next 2 third downs, and the Panthers suddenly are down 27-7 as the defense is getting absolutely smoked. But Bryce does what he can to keep them in the game as he escapes the pocket here and lays the ball out in front of Leggett, turning up the field off a play action Mills concept. But look at this poor adjustment to the ball, stumbling, reaching out with one hand prematurely, not even touching the ball. For most receivers, that's a touchdown or a chunk play at the very least. The next chance Young gets, he perfectly gets Phelan in stride up the seam against quarters once more, as the safety sits on it a little bit too long instead of opening up. And he actually sets up another long field goal attempt to end the half. Bryce comes out hot to start the second half as well, after a run gets stuffed, and now the Bucks send Tampa 2, which is taken advantage of with a softer deep half safety to the field, hitting this dig right in front of him on a dagger concept, while we've got this back coming across on his orbit motion, swinging into the flats. Another beautifully layered throw to negate number 51's impact, potentially getting a hand on this, as he lets it go early before getting too far over the middle of the field. And the receiver makes a diving grab, but unfortunately only for back-to-back sacks to kill that drive, and that was kind of it, as the defense simply couldn't slow down the opposition, while Bryce was getting swallowed up by the rush multiple more times. Bringing us to week 18 at Atlanta, who still have an outside shot at a playoff berth if they take care of business, while the other 2 division foes are going at it as well. We started with a standard completion up the left sideline to Phelan on the stutter fade, nice high punt grab by the vet, and another great throw to beat AJ Terrell here. Next, this on 3rd and 6 is fun, 4 strong to the left, they chip both edges, and they basically cross everyone else up, other than the back flaring out into the flats of the chip. Looks a little more complicated than it actually is. Atlanta only ends up bringing 4, with this linebacker mucked up, dropping off from the center, but that chip to the right side actually helps the end come free on this TE twist. Bryce feels it, but has to stare in the middle of the field to force his hand corner to fly deep, and he puts a quick move on the free rusher, eyes flip, cleats in the ground, and gets the ball to Leggett on the deep crosser. Watch it one more time from the quarterback's perspective, knowing this dude is coming in to take his head off, but makes a miss at the very last moment, sets up and sets the table for a touchdown. And this 2-yard scramble off play action for the score on the very next play just shows off his sneaky elusiveness, being able to slip through these creases and scamper in. This is more of a great design, which is why I have faith in Dave Canales as the man in charge, helping tap into Bryce's strengths and throwing in tendency breakers. The Panthers come out in the 3x1, tight end in a hip slot to the right, who's gonna come in motion just to indicate coverage. And really all they're trying to do here is pull the defense away from where they ultimately want to go, as they've got a bench concept with the 2 receivers to the field, breaking out on different levels, the X on the deep crosser, and then off the token run fake, it's a dart roller to the right with the center pulling, only for the back to basically be uncovered, matched up with the outside linebacker Matt Judon here, up the left sideline. You can really see the entire defense shift to the right, and then Bryce stopping the roll to set his feet here and find Sanders, who everyone else has their backs turned towards, with the outside linebacker chasing here. Ball right in stride, and it's an easy touchdown. Love it. Later in the second half, Young nearly hits an awesome keyhole throw between 3 converging defenders to Thielen up the seam, but the receiver can't quite hold on to it. Yet when they get to 4th and 1, he hits a much easier score off play action to Tremble, where that Steph Curry-esque image of him turning around and signaling touchdown with his arms up before the ball is even caught came out of. Next, he hits a fade to JT Sanders as the de facto flanker from this empty set, with the corner playing hard flat in cover 2 because they had been hitting these quick outbreaking routes versus soft zone looks for most of the day. So he's gonna punish them by throwing the ball over the heads in front of the safety. Bryce had a couple of awesome throws when trying to win the game in regulation, where his targets were tightly covered and again couldn't finish those catches. Yet when they get to overtime, tied at 38 points each, Carolina will put together a well-orchestrated, balanced touchdown drive to not even give Atlanta a chance to possess the ball, with the slant to Thielen here being a key play to convert 3rd down. And finally, he plays around with the rush angles of the Falcons pass rush, scrambles out to the left, and flips the ball to Coker here after extending the play to set them up at the 1-yard line, and allowing Miles Sanders to punch it in on the very next play. That's a great way to finish the season, knocking out a division rival, which ultimately the Bucs won, so it didn't matter in that sense, but just the confidence to get out of this. I don't think I've ever put out a video with this many individual clips, because we typically focus on singular plays, really getting into the minutiae of them, schematic details and decision making by quarterbacks. But even though I'm obviously highlighting the strengths for Young, I did throw in a handful of bad snaps, and the idea here was to present the whole picture and illustrate the many ways in which he turned around a horrendous start to his second season. I don't know if Ejiro Evero can finally coordinate a functional NFL defense in his 3rd season in Carolina with those pieces in place, or if a couple of the pass catchers can step up in 2025. What I do know is that Bryce Young looked like a completely different player once they returned to the lineup, and you could tell his coaching staff took notice as well, as they started putting games into his hands, and he did pretty much everything he could to repay their trust in him. With no meaningful departures, and just drafting Tetro McMillan out of Arizona 8th overall, the big-bodied reliable X-receiver this offense has so desperately been lacking, and now everyone else taking their more adequate place in the pecking order. Considering the growth this run game has already shown, there's plenty of reason for optimism around Bryce and company. We could visibly tell that he regained his confidence as last year went along, so now it's time to continue improving his craft and keep pounding.